We are back. Giants baseball, past, present, and future. I'm Ralph Tyko. My co-host, Timmy Haller, is on assignment. Actually, I'm the guy on assignment. We did a little pilgrimage to the Polo Grounds in New York City. And it's like 3,000 miles plus to get here. But we are at the top of Brush Staircase on Edgecombe Avenue in New York City. And this is like where the Polo Grounds were. I was just downstairs. I took a picture of the plaque that commemorates where home plate stood in the Polo Grounds apartments. And I have two special guests here. One is an old friend of mine on Facebook, and he's a brother from another mother. How about we put it that way? Ronald Harvin. Ronald, come say hello. How you doing? Ronald, you are a resident of the Polo Grounds apartment, and you've got that spirit of the Polo Grounds, although you were born after it was phenomenal. What year were you born?
I was born in 1968.
68? And what was it that drew you to the Giants tradition, the Mets tradition of the Polo?
Well, as a kid, we didn't really know about the Giants too much for the Mets playing here. As I got older into the early 90s, I kind of found out the history about who used to be here. Right. And then I was always wondering what this Giants logo had looked like. And when I found it, I was like, wow, it's like the same logo that the Mets have with the hat and black.
Right. And the emblem is just a little bit different. You look at it, it comes down a little bit, where the Giants where the Mets grew up down there. But your hat comes close enough for government work. And who you rooting for these days? You're a Mets fan these days?
Well, living here in the Polo Grounds, we grew up as Yankee fans because the stadium was like right across the bridge first, so every time we hit the field, we stadium and everything.
Right.
So, you know, we don't like Mets fans, but I do respect the Mets.
Oh, okay.
I respect the Mets, and in '86, when they was the World Series, we rooted for them. I was out of the parade.
Right.
And Giants.
Right.
My neighbors thought they didn't even know.
They had no idea they were in New York. They had no idea they were in New York.
Right. So I'm like, oh, they put the Mets here on. I said, no, this is the New York Giants.
Who's the New York Giants?
I said, oh, yeah, it was a baseball team. It's a baseball team there. So it's like, oh, I just supposed to my area, but know the history. So that's why I'm trying to reach out for and get a lot of people know the history.
Beautiful. I have another guest here. His name is Marc Weiss, and he's become a member of the Festival Zone Radio Network, and he's quite amazing. So why don't you, Marc, give me a little rundown on what you consider to be the most important parts of the Polo Grounds history?
Well, I think the most important part of the Polo Grounds history is probably the one piece that's actually still hanging out over here, which is the Brush Staircase. This is the one that they actually did the refurbishing on, and I believe they opened it up last summer. And the Giants, whether from San Francisco, the Mets, the Yankees, and the football Giants and New York City combined efforts with finance and put it together and really revitalize this place. And it's great because it's a piece of history. It's pretty much known as the only thing left from the original stadium other than the plaque that signifies where home plate is, and I believe that's the building floor.
Right, we went downstairs.
Yeah, so it's amazing. I mean, think about, you got off the subway over here on 155th, you walked a couple of blocks, and you went down this staircase, and you entered through the ticket booth, and you got to see the greatest players in the history of the game playing over there. And the people probably thought it was going to go on forever. And somehow I kind of wish it might have, because I was born a decade and change too late to see it all. I was born a year after the wrecking ball hit this place in 1964. I actually came here in 2014 with a friend of mine on the actual date when the wrecking ball did hit to commemorate it. We did the same thing with Eversfield too in 2010 because 1960 was its wrecking ball day. And people actually remembered. I remember when I got off my bike and there was an older gentleman about 75. He said to me, "You want a tour?" And I said, "Sure, I'll go look myself." He goes, "Nope, I'm taking you with me." And he pointed out, like, this is where Willie caught the ball. This is where the shot that heard around the world was hit by Bobby Thompson. It's 257 feet down the line. It goes 257 feet down the line. And he just gave me so much history about it. But, I mean, this place, I think it was actually the fourth incarnation of the Polo Grounds, the last one that was up here. And a lot of people forget that the Metsies, you know, that's where they started. They were supposed to play 1 year here. And then I believe that when they built, right, in 63 they were supposed to go to State Stadium, but it kind of sunk when it was being built. So they had to reinforce it because they spent another year here. And the cool thing about that was it gave them the chance to acquire Duke Snyder, and he got to play his final, you know, time back here in New York. He played up over here. He got to play in the Polo Grounds as an enemy and as a fan favorite, which I thought was pretty cool. Pretty cool indeed.
Very cool, very cool. Who took you to your first game, Mark?
That's pretty easy. That'd be my grandfather, Harry Sobel, took me to my first game. And believe it or not, that first game was actually the first game of the Montreal Expos, because it was at Shea Stadium in 1969. And I believe it was an 11-10 game that the Mets lost to the Expos, and Tom Seaver started the game. And I think the 4-year-old in me was more interested in the peanuts and the popcorn and all the souvenirs flying around. But my grandfather let me know straight up, when you come to the game, you watch the game. And he taught me so much about the game. I think we could do a million podcasts on what Harry Sobel taught me about baseball and how much I enjoyed it because of him. But my mom was a big Brooklyn Dodger fan, and so like she was always there and she took me to the game. And my grandmother was a big fan too, but they all became Mets fans. In 1962, they finally got a team. And they had 4 years where they had nothing, and they didn't even follow baseball.
You know, it's very similar to my experience. Give credit to Phil Miss for taking me to my first game when I was 4 and a half in the Polo Grounds, 1951. And the first game he took me to was before Willie Mays got called up. I don't remember if it was opening day in 51. I do remember that Jim Hearn pitched the game, and Bobby Thompson was playing center field at the time. And when they called Willie up on May 23rd, they put Bobby Thompson at third for a while. They put Hank Thompson at first for a while. Monty Irvin played first for a while with Bobby Thompson in left. And they just reconfigured the whole team. And I can remember my grandfather pointing out that this new rookie phenom, Willie Mays, has been called up. And he asked me if you're going to go to the game, watch Willie the whole time, and you can't go wrong. The game revolved around him. And you know what? That was 51, and he spent like 20 years having the game revolve around him in every way. And ironically, he ended his career with the New York Mets. With far beyond the Polo Grounds, that had already been demolished, and the Mets were playing in Shea Stadium, and they acquired Willie in 72 for pitcher named Williams from the Giants. Charlie Williams, that was the first. And he just passed away recently himself. Willie's 85. He's still hanging in there, and it's a blessing that we have him. The greatest all-around player that ever lived. Played right downstairs from where we are right now doing this podcast. Absolutely. Yeah. Yes. Marc Weiss, I can verify. Ron Harvin gave me the thumbs up. He has goosebumps indeed, so he's not kidding about it. But you know who we should
talk about? As great as Willie was, we should talk about his mentor, the guy who personified class, Monty Irvin. No one ever said a bad word about Monty Irvin. You know why? Because there was nothing bad to say about Monty. He was a true professional, and he coached Willie to be a professional. And even when Willie wasn't confident in his skills, I mean, Leo DeRocher said to Willie, I think he was over 24 when he came up. He said, just as long as you can field, I don't care if you hit. But it still took Monty to actually calm him down and keep him focused. And he was really the star of those Giants teams, because Willie spent 2 years in military service. I believe it was 52 and 53. He was in military, but Monty was still playing over here. And Monty obviously got a late call up because he had played in the Negro Leagues, and once Jackie Robinson broke the color line, Monty was part of that next group that came in. But imagine if he had played his whole career in the majors. It would have been amazing. It would have been amazing to see that. Thankfully, he did make the Hall of Fame because he certainly deserved it. And he served in the commissioner's office. Remember that? He served in the commissioner's office for years.
Yes, he did.
And he just passed away, I think, at 95.
Yeah.
And that's what the man truly missed.
I'm going to tell you a Monty Irvin story that you may not know, Mark. My co-host on the Peter Dolenbach show on the Comfortably Zoned Network wrote a book about Brooklyn. And one of the chapters in the book was about Monty Irvin. And I asked Peter, I said, why Monty in Brooklyn? What in the Brooklyn book? It wasn't an all baseball book, but it was a book about some of the people that, in all walks of life, that signified the borough of Brooklyn. And he told me a little story about Monty Irvin, that before Branch Rickey decided on Jackie Robinson to be the first African American, that time colored, then it was Negro, African American, now it's black. The first black person to play in the majors chosen by Branch Rickey was Jackie Robinson. So he wasn't the first person that Branch Rickey asked to be the first person. That first person was Monty Irvin. And turns out, I asked this Novak, I said, how come he turned him down? He said, well, Monty had gone through an awful lot of abuse, not only in the Negro Leagues, but in the Army. And he made the call that he just was affected too much by that, what he took, and he had reached the point where he couldn't agree to turn the other cheek for the first 2 years he was in the big leagues, like Jackie agreed to. He was not going to be able to take what was heaped upon him by people like Eddie Sawyer, the manager of Philadelphia. Phillies was a blatant racist, and they used it. St. Louis, Gilbert Raffiola, Spike Jackie. It was a racist world, and Monty just asked him, "Can I think about it a couple of days?" He came back to him and said, "No, I'm just not your man. I've been through too much in the Army. I'm taking too much, and I don't know what's going to happen. I can't promise you that if I take what's going to break the camel's back, what's going to be said, who's going to spike me, what it is." And he respectfully declined, and Branch Rickey chose Jackie Robinson. So,
Incredible. That is an incredible story, man. If you think about it, knowing the personas that they took on later in life and what we know about them, Jackie was the more aggressive of the players, and the more aggressive and pushing the envelope and everything they didn't like after they said the 2-year experiment was over. And Monty was the personification of calm, cool, and professional. That you would never have thought that to be true, but it totally makes sense.
well, the calm and cool he kept inside. He internalized. He was burning. All of his life he was burning. He asked people to take, and again, I could speak as you about looking at Ronald Harvin, a black gentleman. I can understand as a Jew, the constant prejudice, but a Jew with white skin, almost white skin, can hide. In other words, the first thing that doesn't come up is my race or my religion when I meet somebody. First thing that comes up in someone's head, and in your head, when you meet someone, is the color of your skin. You can't get by that.
So you're saying Monty would have basically broke down if he was selected
Monty,
first.
if he was selected first, Monty may not have been able to carry out Branch Rickey's. The promise that Jackie made to Branch Rickey is that you don't think he just hold it. He wasn't necessarily more tolerant. He internalized it and burned inside, but he was at the time where Jackie was born in Pasadena, okay, in California. I come to find out through talking to Peter Goldbach and others, that there was a tremendous amount of racism that he experienced in California. He experienced a lot of racism in the service. He was an educated man, and he was a sensitive man. And as a matter of fact, I don't know if he got court-martialed. He didn't get court-martialed, but he was threatened with a court-martial.
They gave him an honorable discharge, provided he would just leave.
Right.
They wanted him out of the military. He was a lieutenant. And he was not about to, because back in World War II, units were segregated. They weren't desegregated until Harry Truman became president, and this was during the Korean War, where he said, look, we're all Americans, we're fighting a war, we're going to fight together. We're not having segregated units anymore. And Harry Truman made a lot of tough decisions, and that was one of them based on politics, that he got a lot of pressure from Southern voters. But he said, no way this is going to happen. In Jackie's case, it was during a time when the units were all completely segregated, and he fought against it. He never saw that type of prejudice until he went to the South when he trained. And he was so late when he was in Pasadena. He heard prejudice when he went down south. But he was using the local spot. And he said, it's not the type of guy who did really smart. He could sometimes part of the kind of what he did. And they decided that maybe it was a good idea not to have him around anymore because everyone else was starting to see what he was doing.
Ronald.
This is interesting because I remember watching the movie about Jackie Robinson, and when he played for the minor league in Montreal,
Yes.
they didn't have too much racism in Canada.
No, because Montreal is a very, very progressive city and was even back then. So Jackie played in Montreal and then came with the Dodgers. He experienced pure racism that was like Frank Robinson and the Pistons did in the minor years later. Right. So not to take anything away from Jackie's experience, a whole bunch of blacks that followed him and crossed the line later on to experience an awful lot of that southern pride, Jim Crow bullshit that has kept the world down. And you know what? Things are still not better than they were. Things are progressing, but not fast enough for the people that wanted it done yesterday. And there you go. That's my history of the Polo Grounds. And listening to my grandfather explain all those things. So like you did with your grandfather, Mark. We were blessed to have people, like my grandfather would tell me things about Frankie Swift and Mel Ott and all the guys that Roger Hornsby played in the Polo Grounds. Johnny Mize played in the Polo Grounds. Carl Hubble, the great Carl Hubble. And it had to, now, I have the same goosebumps just being in the area.
Just brought up a great name when you said Mel Ott. I mean, that's a forgotten name on baseball. But you know the big story idol growing up? Mel Ott.
Absolutely.
I was a Giants fan. I went to Fordham University. When I listened to his broadcast, and by the way, they're few and far between. They're coming to an end. Yeah. He retires at the end of this month. When I listened to them, and he waxed poetic about stories about the sports flash and a lot, and all of those guys, and he'll talk about the Brooklyn Dodgers. But he really stories they know.
Right.
And that's the same thing. It's like this is the burden that's
Now, on us as the baseball historians and fans, we've got to remember those stories.
we've got to retell them. And we've got to let everybody know about all those guys who came before. I mean, Miller, 511 home runs, led the National League in home runs when he retired. They thought no one would ever break that record.
Right.
And not even
right. And he was also the greatest crossword. Mel Ott was the greatest crossword puzzle answer. 6 down, 3 letters. Played with the Giants. Ott. And there was another Ott that came along later. His name was Ed Ott.
If you're a Met fan, you remember that he's the guy who pile drive Felix Mian in that play when he slid into second base and pretty much ended Felix's career.
Yeah.
And Felix is one of my favorites.
Mine too. The cat they called him, and he had 2 numbers with the Mets. Just right off the top of my head. I think when he first came, and then I think 16 was the other number. When he first came to the Mets, it was 15, and then they gave him 17. They made some changes after that. Felix was a very, very good, solid ball player, and they won with him at second base in 1973. They didn't go all the way. That was one of my favorite all-time Met teams. We'll talk about that on another podcast.
And I will tell you my Felix Mian story because I met him in person.
Did
I
you really?
got that World Series. We'll have to save that for later.
We'll save that for another time, Mark. This has been a tremendous little podcast that we're having here. And, I just want some final thoughts before we wrap it up.
For one, I'm happy to have learned some new history about, the Polo Grounds and the players that played in, how Jackie Robinson came about and the things that he faced. And I didn't know Monty was first to be asked to come into the league. Now I found out it was him, but Jackie Robinson was more of the guy who would, not feud with the fans, I guess. He took on the track.
He made it happen.
And everybody followed through, and opened the door for more of the black players to play in, and then that's when they demolished folded the Negro Leagues.
Let me give you one more piece of history, ladies and gentlemen, if you're out there, Mark and Ronald. In 1951, Mark knows everything, so I'm telling you something. He knows even what I'm talking about. In 1951, in the playoffs, Don Mueller slid into third base and broke his arm. I think he sprained his ankle really badly. They took him off the field, and he didn't play in the World Series. So what the Giants did, they did a little finagling. They put Hank Thompson in right. They had Willie in center, and Monty Irvin in left. And what that represented was the first time that 3 black people played in the same outfield at the same time, and it happened to be in the World Series of 1951 against the Yankees.
4 years after Jackson. Think about how quick that was. 4 years after Jackson, that was able to happen. And you know why it happened? It's about winning.
Right.
About winning.
And they
wasn't going to be the best chance to win. He was the guy who pitched ran for Bowler with
Mueller.
They did his ankle in.
Right.
Measuring.
And you think that was fast when they got the three outfielders in the same outfit? It was not all that long later. It was 1959 when the Boston Red Sox took the liberty of bringing up their first black player because Tom Yawkey was a racist pig, and he had at one time or another both Jackie Robinson and Willie Mays in a tryout camp, and they decided that those 2 guys weren't good enough to make the major leagues. the racist Yorkie is in the Hall of Fame. The carpetbagging son of a bitch, Walter O'Malley, who took the Dodgers to Los Angeles, and right along with him went Horace with the Giants, although he was going anyway. He was going to Minneapolis. Right?
Ronald and I were talking about that before he showed up.
All right. Well, then I know my stuff, is what you're telling me.
You are nailing it.
All right. He was going to Minneapolis. So the way that Horace, the way that O'Malley, who had to be the brightest guy on earth, he knew that it would be impractical to have teams take a road trip to the West Coast just to play one team.
Mexico wouldn't let them do it.
Right. So the way he did it was when the Giants wanted to move to Minneapolis, Horace said, wait a minute. Or O'Malley said, wait a minute. I've got territorial rights at a minor league team in St. Paul. If you remember, one of the St. Paul Saints were a minor league team. He called in the rights to the area, the territorial rights, put Horace in a bind, convinced Horace to come out to San Francisco, and actually it worked out good for the two franchises. But what failed in the annals of baseball history and the history of New York City was the tremendous void that losing the Giants and the Dodgers at one time left in this city. It tore the heart out of the borough of Brooklyn. To be perfectly frank, this ballpark that we're standing over the remains of, it was toast in those days. Horace knew that they couldn't afford the upkeep on the stadium. They couldn't afford renovations. And of course, so succinctly put it, to the kids that they were leaving, the kids like me, I was 10 years old when the Giants left. I was pissed. I cried. State team staying. There was a sign the last day against Pittsburgh in 57. It said, stay team stay. And they didn't. And it was absolutely heartbreaking. But Horace gave a speech to those kids. He said, you know, if your parents wanted this so badly, they would have filled up the place. So, people gave up on the Giants, and the city of New York, Robert Moses, the mayor of New York, Robert Wagner at the time, put it inside O'Malley's head that they weren't going to please him. And O'Malley, on the other hand, was looking for a way out way before. In the 55 World Series, he was already making plans to leave.
Opening day in 1956, when they finally got to raise the Dodgers' first championship banner, Ebbets Field fell out for a day game. And he used that, he said to himself, I can't make it here. And Robert Moses was not a willing partner to work with either, because Ronald and I were talking about that before, because O'Malley probably reached too far and wanted the same area where the Barclays Center is right now over Flatbush Avenue, and he wouldn't give it to him because his dream was to put a team in Flushing Meadow for his World's Fair project, and he wanted first the Dodgers to be the centerpiece of that. And O'Malley said, I'm the Brooklyn Dodgers, I'm not the Queens Dodgers. I'm not going out there. I can soon as go 3,000 miles away, I'd go 30 miles away or 15 miles away. I don't want to go there. And the Dodgers were actually experimenting that time. They played games in Jersey City, and they didn't have great attendance there either. And I think that was another kick to tell them, like, you know, I'm the Dodgers. The Dodgers back then were like the Braves were in the 90s. They were America's team. And so that's why they felt they could go anywhere. And Robert Moses pushed them, and he thought no one's ever going to leave New York. And guess what? He didn't just lose one. He lost two teams.
That's right. They left. But never lose sight of the fact that in the 50s, the Dodgers were profitable. They were the most profitable team in the National League. So he wasn't bailing out. I can understand Stoneham bailing out, but historians could never understand the greed that took place in O'Malley's head. It was pure greed. When you have it all and you want more, that's greed. Stoneham was struggling. There's a difference.
Now, O'Malley had it all. He really did, because he had the marquee franchise. Because after Jackie, then all of a sudden you brought in Roy Campanella, Don Newcomb. All of a sudden his team went from being a really good team to being a powerhouse in the National League. We have stories about wait till next year, but they were always there every year. But he looked and he saw the Braves move from Boston and went to Milwaukee, and they got this beautiful stadium built by the side of the interstate, and they were drawing like 2.5 million fans a year. And now he's in Ebbets Field with only seating 35,000, scoring 1.3. He still had it all. He was still selling out. He was still making money. He had a great TV contract. But he wanted what the guy in Milwaukee had. He wanted more. That's what was greed. And he wasn't losing here. Stoneham, on the other hand, was in the red. No question about it. Dilapidated ballpark. No money put into it at that point. And he saw his fan base eroding. And he wasn't doing anything to it. He wasn't doing anything to make it better, to be quite honest. But O'Malley had it all. He was the guy, and yet he still wanted more because he saw the guy in Milwaukee had a little more than him. And if we can't call that greed, I don't know what we can call it.
My big regret over all of it is not getting to see Willie play in what I call his first prime. When Willie was unaffected, he had Leo DeRocher as his manager. He was spoiled. He was unaffected. He was a happy kid. And the move out of New York was a very difficult one for Willie. He wasn't accepted readily in San Francisco. The move coincided with the Giants calling up some of their tremendous farm system. Orlando Cepeda won the hearts of the Giants fans. McCovey came a little later, but it took Willie a long time to win the fans of San Francisco over. And he finally did in the end. I think Willie is still the most beloved person in San Francisco to have played baseball. But, most people in San Francisco, if they really look to their hero, it's Willie McCovey. He's had Stretch was the man in San Francisco.
Homegrown. Yeah, homegrown, and he was their guy. And they looked at Willie as being that New York kind of guy, right? That flashy New York guy. And Cepeda was a homegrown guy, and McCovey wasn't. They came year after year. Then Marisol came year after year. That Giants farm system was churning out Hall of Fame players.
Right.
And Willie came from New York to Toronto. They say he left. The song says he left your heart in San Francisco. Well, some people say that Willie kind of left it in New York at one point. And I remember when he came back here with the Mets, and the way the Mets fans, which a lot of them were former Giant fans and a lot of them former Dodger fans, all agreed having Willie back in New York was like the greatest thing in the world. Obviously they wish they had him more in his prime, but just to have Willie back, because he was one of our own.
They won more World Series in '73 that they lost to the Oakland Athletics. So,
that was kind of sad to see Willie in those days because it was clearly over the hill. He had some flashes, and they won, and they came real close. They won 6 games. Happened to be the 6th game was the only World Series game I've ever seen in my life. It was played in Oakland, and the Tom Seaver game. A little trivia. Charlie Finley, the owner of Oakland, had got his name, throw out the first pitch. The famous comedian Jack Benny. They have a statue of Jack Benny in the Cucamonga team. There's a team in Cucamonga in the California League, and they had Jack Benny's joke was Cucamonga, and they have a statue of Jack Benny outside of the stadium in Cucamonga. But he threw out the first pitch of that 73 game number 6 in the World Series. So we got a lot of memories of baseball, the Giants, Tale of Two Cities, and 3,000 miles. I made the pilgrimage with the lovely and provocative Tally Olson, who's the mainstay of Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And we came back for a neighborhood reunion in Jackson Heights, and for this pilgrimage in this moment where we could sit here, 3 baseball fans who have a lot invested in the memory of the New York Giants can sit here and we got all Giant hats on with the NYs, and we're sitting and glowing and eating it all up. So here we are, ladies and gentlemen. You'll look at the picture when we put it up and on Facebook, and I'm going to post this interview within the next day or so, and I was delighted to have you both here to join in my happiness of finally making the pilgrimage. Thank you, Ronald.
I'm glad to finally meet you. We always see each other 3,000 miles away, and now we're 3 inches away from each other now.
It's pretty cool, man.
You know what I found out? That shot heard around the world. They said Willie Mays was on deck.
Indeed. He was on deck, and he was a 20-year-old kid, and he was nervous. He didn't know what was going to happen if they left it in his hands. He wasn't a Willie then. This was his first year. He hit like 273. It took him a long time to get started, but he was a spark. He had the energy, and he certainly sparked him when he came back from the service. He went into the service in the 52 and the 53 season, and certainly sparked him in 54 when they went on to that miracle 4 games in a row over the Cleveland Indians. First game, he made a catch off Bickworth that was overshadowed by the throw that he made to hold the runners in place and keep the runners out of scoring position. Was much more spectacular than the catch, which in itself was like the second or third best catch that Willie ever made, but not the greatest catch he ever made. And yes, Ronald's acting out that catch and throw as we speak, and it was amazing. Over his shoulder, the throw, he turned around and wheeled, and Willie was Willie. He's the high point of all of our memories, and I hope he lives forever, and I'm the last guy he sees before he dies. That's bad, whatever that means.
About it, but I couldn't go. Yeah, Willie Mays did get a chance to come back because Tier 46 is in center field, so he got a chance to come back. My niece told me about it. I wanted to come, but I couldn't go because I didn't attend the school. And see, the kids in the school didn't know the history about. They are like 8, 9 years old at the time. So, but I was happy to hear that he came back. I have to find a picture that I took next to the door.
With your niece?
No, with the sign that said "Willie, welcome back home, Willie Mays."
Oh, that'd be great. That'd be great.
Yeah, so he did get a chance to come back to the Polo Grounds, and Tier 46, that's basically center field, the Polo Grounds outfield.
Beautiful.
Hey, Ronald, do you know the legend of what Willie used to do before games? He used to play stickball with the kids in the street here. Right down this way. Matter of fact, if you look at the old footage, you'll recognize these buildings. If you look at the old footage, he used to play stickball with the kids.
Right. Beautiful. Talking about Willie playing stickball with the kids. Willie and kids, he has a charisma around kids that is wonderful. So listen, I'm going to close this out, guys. This has been terrific. To be continued. How about that? We make another pilgrimage 10 years from now. All right, you come out to San Francisco, and we'll go out to AT&T
Yeah, AT&T Park together, Ronald.
See that sign that's just cool. Or we could sit in front of we could sit in front of where Candlestick was and talk with Willie over there.
Right, another ballpark that has been amazing. You know, one thing about getting old is you get a lot of memories, and that keeps you young. So, thank you guys. I'm going to end the show the way I always do, just telling everybody to keep on keeping on. That's very important. And we'll catch you on the flip-flop. Thank you, everybody. Over and out now.